Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the webinar series. This is Matt Hill from Benro USA. And with me today, I have the amazing Eduardo Angel. Eduardo, say hello.
Hello.
So I have so much to say about Eduardo. But this webinar was born from a conversation that he and I were having. And that's, we liked the conversation that we had so much that we decided that it was important to share it with you.
Yep.
So a little backstory, you might notice that Eduardo and I are friendly. That's because we've been friends for a long time.
A long time.
Long time. Yeah, we've known each other years. We're not going to count them, but years.
More than decades.
More than yeah. So who said we're counting? But it's important to say that my respect for Eduardo is hard to measure. The things that he's accomplished are extraordinary. And his ability to work on new ideas and then make them happen is something I've admired for a long time. So it's a pleasure and an honor to talk with you today, Eduardo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for doing what you do. Today, so just a brief intro. The reason that we are talking about this today was Eduardo and I were talking about his program called One Person Crew. And his program is centered around one philosophy. Why don't you tell us briefly what that is, Eduardo?
Well, the One Person Crew is about doing more with less. And less means less resources, less people, less gear, less time, less money. And my hope is that we can talk about why that is so relevant nowadays. But that was not created because of the COVID or anything like that. I started this project without the proper One Person Crew name like 4 years ago, when my wife and I decided to take a break from New York and from all the things we were doing and travel around the world. And the idea was to do it for 6 months, that later became 12 months and then ended up being 18 months. And during that journey to 20 countries, 200 cities, I realized that if I wanted to capture the stories that we were encountering all over, I had to downsize my gear and streamline my workflow, because I was working by myself and we were traveling with carry-ons each, one carry-on each, and one like laptop backpack for a year and a half. So while doing the research on like, okay, what is the least amount of sound recording gear you need, and or what are the most versatile but smaller, lighter lenses that I can get, I realized that there wasn't a good place to find that information. And that there were bits and pieces all over the place in different forums on Facebook and Twitter and many different places. So during my journey, I started compiling all these lessons and tips and tricks and things that I was learning, and a lot of mistakes that I was making, that I still make. And the One Person Crew as a platform was created. And since then, that's the place where I share with others all the interesting things that we keep learning every single day, literally.
Amazing. Now, folks, we're gonna have a conversation, and I'll show you what the structure of today is going to be. But Eduardo has a pretty deep website called, and you can see it on his shirt, the number one person crew.com.
Number one person crew.
Yeah, number one person, the number one.
The number one.
Crew.com. We'll post some links and stuff in the chat. If you want to read a lot and subscribe, that's a great place to start. But here, stick with us. This is going to be a live conversation. It is being recorded. So give us your full attention. If you have questions, please leave it in the chat. We're going to have some breaks for questions. We love questions. Ask all of the questions you want to ask.
We do.
And we have structure. So we're going to go through and talk about 3 different topics. And then we're going to take it to its natural place after that. But most of all, I think I just want to talk a little bit about why people should understand where you're coming from, or what they should understand where you're coming from. What are the stages of vocation in your life that you've gone through prior to this?
Well, do we have, how many hours do we have?
You have 3 minutes or less.
So I started my professional life as an architect. Then and one day I woke up and realized that I was working really hard to make money, to go places, to take pictures. And then one day it clicked that maybe this is what I should be doing instead. And I got an MFA in photography. Then I moved to Chicago, where I combined the two things I knew how to do, which is architectural photography, which makes sense. And that was right at the transition between like when digital transformation was happening. So there was no one really like who knew like what was going on, how to shoot with digital backs and color workflow, raw workflow, all that stuff. And so I started learning because I like those kind of things, and I learned enough to get a job in New York as like a technical consultant for several years. And after that, I left and I started getting more into video with the 5D and like the whole revolution that everybody's fully aware of. And I started getting more and more and more and more, and to the point that a few years later, I started working on bigger productions with bigger crews and bigger budgets. I ended up winning an Emmy as a director of photography, and that of course opened the floodgates for even bigger projects with bigger budgets, with bigger crews. And at one point, I realized that I was kind of like back to the beginning. I was like working nonstop, making really good money and a lot of like professional success, but I was further away from my craft, which was telling stories and doing like little projects and like more like handmade. So that's when I took the break. And since then, I have been working on much smaller projects and often as a one-person crew. So that's kind of like the whole story.
That's great. And like I said, I've admired your tenacity and your ability to pivot all along the way. We're going to run through this a little bit. So the topic of today, because you all signed up for it, was turning challenges into opportunity.
Yep.
And I have to say that this is attitudinal. This is something you have to choose to do, and we're going to talk more about that. Also, you can see, I know I did this. Eduardo didn't do it. It might be gratuitous, but I put a picture of him grabbing his Emmy there. So I like the picture. It makes me happy.
I do too.
So there's a quick video to show you guys. This is about a minute. And this gives you an overview about what Eduardo does, just to really button up where he comes from. Awesome. So that just shows him in work. And I want to make it clear, if you're watching this, we designed this for photographers who are transitioning into video, or established filmmakers that are working with small crews, all kinds of content creators, plus anyone else who wants to make money creating powerful videos with very little gear. And I know that there weren't any planes flying over where you were yesterday when we did our preparation for this. But
I
that's
don't know.
okay.
I don't know why.
That's fine.
The wind changed.
It's true. It's true. That means business is happening. That's great. What we're going to cover today, here's the structure. We covered this already. Who's Eduardo, right? And what's the one person crew approach? We already crossed that off the list, right? And then we have 3 topics that we're going to dive into. We're multiple hats, shrinking marketing budgets, and working safely on site. And then essential gear, and then how you can continue learning with Eduardo. So let's start with the basic assertion here. You could choose to view boundaries, things that don't allow forward progress, as roadblocks. You could say, I can't do anything because this thing's in my way. Or you could say that's an opportunity to change the narrative. And I phrased it that way on purpose because narrative is everything when you're doing any act of filmmaking. Creation of marrying audio with video and something that has a timeline. It is a narrative. You have to tell a story within the start and the end of that. So right. Your attitude has everything to do with how you view things that get in your way.
And there's also something that I believe is pretty much always true. There's always the flip side of everything, and it's true to investments. Like when a company goes bankrupt, other companies benefit from that. When someone just a door opens, another one closes for someone else or in other way. So the way I try to see things is like, okay, this situation seems like a challenge, seems like a roadblock, but what's the other side? What's the flip side of this? Like, who can benefit from this situation, or how can I benefit from this? Or how can I learn from this? How can I apply new lessons moving forward? And there is always a silver lining on every single challenge is an opportunity.
Truth, and to avoid the risk of acting as if it's a platitude, we're going to give you some examples of how we have done that. So, our first, I guess, challenge would be anybody who says it's a hassle to wear so many hats on a production. I'm tired. This is hard. That's why there's so many people to do this. It takes a village to make a video. Eduardo, how do you feel about this?
I believe it's very hard. It is very hard. It is very challenging to, especially when you're on location shooting and you're trying to concentrate on so many moving pieces, right? So you're making sure that like, for example, like yesterday, I was asking questions from the subject, but at the same time, I'm keeping an eye on the battery and checking exposure and monitoring sound and moving the camera and what am I supposed to ask next. There are a lot of moving pieces, but there are also a lot of opportunities because every single skill you learn is gonna inform and enhance other skills. So they are all interconnected, and you can play different games, right? So we briefly talked during our original conversation how I am not a video editor. I do edit, and I like it. I enjoy editing, but there are much better skilled people than me. But when this situation, the lockdown happened, I had the opportunity to help other people setting up remote editing workflows and teaching other people getting up and running or on Premiere Pro, for example. So that's not my primary role, but because I have been doing it for so long and it's something I enjoy, I can share that knowledge with other people. Right. So it's definitely an advantage. And one example that I always give to my students is, especially the ones that want to be directors of photography, DOPs, is you need to learn how to edit. And they're like, no, I'm a director of photography. I'm not an editor. I'm gonna work with an editor. Like, yeah, true. That's fantastic. But only when you understand what the editor needs, then you start thinking as an editor. Like you can be shooting, you can be the DOP, but then you're gonna be shooting less of what you don't need, more coverage of the things you might need later. You're gonna be more efficient, and it's gonna definitely help. A director, for example, doesn't need to know anything about how the camera works. And I know several directors that don't know anything about cameras. But if you understand how lenses work and like how different like a wide angle lens versus long lens or like lighting works, you're gonna be a better director. There's no question about it. And so wearing multiple hats is hard. There's no there's no way to sugarcoat it. But every single skill you learn is gonna make you stronger at something else.
Oh, I completely agree with that. And I think we both read the same book at different times and reinforced. I know I held this belief prior to reading the book, but it reinforced my feelings about that and my understanding of how things are connected. The book that we both read is called The Conversations by
Fantastic.
Michael Ondaatje. We can flash it on the screen here for you guys. It was written about conversations between Michael Ondaatje and Walter Murch, and the book title is a pluralization of one of Walter's seminal movies called The Conversation with Gene Hackman, and Walter's main point of view in that was that he started as a sound editor, and then he became a film editor. And he believed,
which is not normal. That's not a normal transition.
No, absolutely not. And he believed that plus many of the other things that he does, he's considered a Renaissance man. Yeah. He's interested in many things that are not directly connected to film editing or sound design. He believes that all of the things that he does has informed his decisions that he makes while performing his profession. And this book blew me away, and it informed everything I did going forward. It actually allowed me as an artist to release judgment when I'm making art, to say, you know what, I don't have an end goal in mind when I'm making something, a particular kind of art. I'm just going to make it for the joy of making. Yeah. And the destination is the journey. And that right there just allowed me to let everything else filter in, instead of worrying about setting boundaries as a goal for a project, to say, I'm just going to let everything else come in and be a part of it until it's done. And it's bled into other things in my life, especially I did film editing for a while too. I still do it, for commercial stuff, but I've edited a feature film once too. And that helped me a lot during that time. And I got to go on set, and this is what you're talking about. I got to go on set and I saw the actors doing what they're doing. I saw the DP doing what they're doing. I got to be there for script revision with the director. And it was a problem too. And I got to say that it was, and I'll finish my story in a second. I got on this, I think is an important tangent. I had a problem with that. I had a personal connection to the actors because I was present. And we all slept in the same house, and I was there for like 4 days of filming, and I had a separate relationship with them versus the one that I should have, which is only within the boundaries of the edit window, and being the primary caretaker of the story as the editor. And that affected me, and I had to divorce myself from those things as much as possible, and the feelings and knowledge I had about the actors outside of their roles as actors.
Which is interesting, because that's one of the reasons why I enjoy working with editors, with video editors. And especially now that I'm living in Lisbon, I work with a fantastic video editor, with Bruno. And he not only is very fast, way faster than I could ever be, but he is not connected emotionally to the footage. So if I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and it was freezing cold and I was so hungry and I waited for hours for sunrise and I got that shot and the slider didn't work and all these problems, and then I have to use the shot, I have to use that clip, right? Like it was so painful to get. And like he would like, no, doesn't work. It's not part of the story. It's out. Or out of like whatever 30 seconds, we're gonna use 3 seconds. That's what we need. And that's so good for the story, because what matters is the story, not how early I woke up or how pain and how much pain I had to endure to get that shot. What matters is this moving the story forward or not? And that's what a photo editor or a video editor brings to the table. And it's priceless.
Yes, that emotional detachment from the
Absolutely.
creative or the creation of the creative. I totally agree. And this comes around to all of the things you've had to do to become a one-person crew. Our main point in this first discussion topic is that it's an advantage instead of a disadvantage to have to wear all of the hats on a production. And we just talked about editing, which is after you're done shooting, right? You can always send out for that. That's great. But if you're the one person that can show up, being able to wear all of the hats to some degree of ability is very important to understand how to make all of it happen and say, this still has value and there's less risk because there's only one person showing up.
And you can play different roles. Like it's just so wonderful to be able to go to a location and then plan the shots. So basically, you are the producer in that instance, or the director, and then you're actually shooting that, and then you're editing the shots, and then you're playing with music and sound, and so you're also the composer in a way, and you're informing. And for clients, that's a huge value added when you can actually bring a lot to the table and streamline the process. And it definitely is a huge advantage to cover many different roles.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I've liked about reading all of your blog posts as they come out is seeing that when somebody says, hey, can you do a job? This might be hard. We have concerns. Your response is, listen, it's not something you have to worry about. I can do it all. Let's talk about what's feasible,
right,
and what's a stretch, and don't worry about the rest. I got this.
Yeah.
And that I find, if I needed you, I would hire you because
especially like I mean, even before COVID, with travel restrictions and how expensive sometimes it is to hire a crew and like move a crew to 4 or 5 different countries. It can get really expensive, like moving 7 people, 10 people around.
That takes us to our next point.
Okay, let's
there it is. Our next point.
Perfect.
Marketing budgets keep shrinking and deadlines keep getting tighter.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Well, one of the challenges with digital is that a lot of clients, especially new, like without a lot of experience, think that because it's digital is instant. Is like you just press a button and it's like, oh, it comes a video, like fully matured, and everybody knows it's not true.
Right.
So, but the deadlines sometimes are very, very tight, and working as a one-person crew has the disadvantage that certain things take longer, but at the same time, you don't have any red tape to go through. You are not waiting for anyone else to do certain things. And you can once you make one decision, you're making that decision as four different people making the one decision, because
right.
you are doing that. For example, a very clear example is setting up. I have done a lot of like corporate interviews. So even if I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, it still takes a little bit longer by myself to set up the lights, to set up the cameras, to make sure to test the sound, and make sure everything is going. It's gonna be perfect. Have a backup plan. It obviously takes me longer than if I had 2 or 3 or 4 people helping me. But once the show is on, and I'm manning the camera and asking the questions, and I know my lighting, I know what to expect from the cameras, then it's flawless. It just goes very, very nicely, and I'm not waiting for someone else to do anything. And the same with all the tutorials, all the educational content that I create. I set up things in a way that it takes me a little bit longer to set up, but once I'm set up, I don't need anybody else. I'm controlling all the devices by myself, the camera, the lights, the microphones, and I'm downloading everything and editing. So it it's comes with a lot of freedom to be able to do that.
I think you just answered Nuno's question. Don't you feel the need for an extra pair of hands sometimes?
Yeah, so sometimes yes, and but sometimes it takes the time it's gonna take to explain someone the way you work, explain how this is gonna work, or how the client likes certain things, especially if you are in a foreign country meeting someone like a gaffer or a grip or someone else for the first time.
Right.
That's, I mean, it's such a steep learning curve, and to understand each other technically what we're looking for, that extra pair of hands, it's not really that it's not really cutting time or saving that much time. So
Right. So when do you think the time savings, is it like, it might be hard to put a number on, but I want to ask you, is there a number of people or certain kinds of people that the extra investment in time to manage and communicate with them makes it worth it? And I don't mean that you don't think it isn't. I'm
no,
just saying there's got to be
I totally get it. I think it also depends on what each person's strengths are, right? Like if you are a really good editor, you're very fast editing, well, you don't need an extra hand with that.
Right.
But for example, I don't like producing. I do it, but I don't like production. I don't like the scheduling. I don't enjoy the process of making the phone calls, arranging locations, booking hotels. I don't like it. I do it, but if I could have that person to take over the production, oh my God, that would be a blessing. But sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
I feel you.
But it also depends. Other people love, like producers, most producers love production, so they probably would get a hand doing something else. So it really depends on your strengths.
Right. Okay. So the heart of the matter here is they want me to do more for less money.
Yeah, that's a classic problem. And the one person crew approach is doing more with less, but that doesn't mean doing more for less. And sure, like part of the value added that you bring to the client is, listen, you are not flying 7 people. We don't need 7 hotel rooms, and that, which means 2 cars and 21 meals per day. That's so we can save some of that money, but someone still needs to do, like, work on the script. Someone needs to shoot. Someone needs to edit. Someone needs to do location scouting. So those jobs are still gonna get done, and the value of the project is the same. So we can save a little bit on expenses, but that doesn't mean that you're just like splitting the budget by 7 and that's the new budget. That's totally unrealistic.
Yep. I love it. I love it. How this, you can just turn it on its ear. The budgets are less, so cut the expenses down, and the project's still worth the same amount of money.
The project is the same, and I would even, in many situations, like the travel and lifestyle projects I work on, they are actually stronger because they have one voice, and there's no misunderstandings between one step and the next.
Yep. Now I guess I talked about the last book too. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about this one. There's been a couple of things that I've read that just that helped me, that infused in my life. This is one that I read during an alt MBA course, and it's called The Beautiful Constraint. And this is definitely complementary to the heart of the matter that we're talking about here. I recommend that everybody out there try and grab either. It's a beautifully printed book if you get the paper version, or the ebook. The content is also extraordinary. It's all about ways to train your brain to see things that are commonly seen as disadvantages as beautiful constraints. Just like you describe it differently in your brain, and suddenly other opportunities open up. And it sounds frou-frou until you actually do it, and you see that you are able to do more by just changing your mind about a situation. And people, we have a situation now, don't we?
How is the book formatted? Is it like interviews, or like they have several different problems and they analyze each problem, or how?
There's a lot of case studies in it. A lot of case studies in there. They did a lot of research from people across a broad spectrum of life pursuits and vocations.
Wow.
And provide examples about how people chose to adopt a beautiful constraint, as the opportunity instead of the disadvantage.
There was when we could fly a few months ago. I watched a movie on a plane. I don't remember exactly the title, but if I remember, I'll send it to you. And it was about 7 or 8 very accomplished professionals in very different fields, athletes and business people and all these kind of things.
Right.
And they were interviewing them about how, like, are you naturally like gifted? Like, were you born like this? And actually, all of them were on paper not suited for what they actually end up doing. Like, they were not as fast as the other kids, or they couldn't read as well, or they had like learning disabilities or something else. So because they had those challenges, they found hacks, shortcuts. They made other parts of their brain and their body stronger, and that became their superpower, which was absolutely amazing. And that's what Garrincha, I think it was the name of the soccer player from Argentina, who played with the left. Like, his strongest leg was his left leg, and he played in a very weird way. He looked like he was dancing all the time, and that was a problem, right? Like, you're not supposed to play soccer like when you cannot even walk very well.
Right.
But that was so confusing to the other players that he was incredible.
Doing? Yeah. What are his legs doing?
Yeah. What is he doing? What is he going? So that is, I think, totally in line with the book, and which I haven't read, but I will. It's on my library queue. And that's true for all of us. Like, we all have certain skills, technical skills or people skills or different things that we can develop. And the weaknesses that we have, like this guy, like,
right,
who couldn't really walk or run very well, then he developed something else that became his superpower. And that's applicable, like, to all aspects of life, I believe.
I agree, and I recently did I got a job locally, which I wasn't even fishing for, but they hired me because not only do I do repro work, but I also make video. So what they wanted was to have these reproductions made, but also to have some small videos walking around the pieces, so that they could have better marketing on their website. Because obviously, we're less face-to-face connected now, so e-commerce is becoming a really important thing. It was important; it's most important right now. So, having those two skills together was exactly the epitome of what you're saying. Was they chose me because of that, because they could get both. And I looked them in the eye. I said, "Can you do this?" I said, "Yes." "Can you do that?" "Yes." And I said, "How about this too?" And they're like, "Oh, didn't know about that." So the more things you can feel confident about doing and stacking, the more valuable you are. But that doesn't mean you don't discount.
Yeah. No. The job is the same. And in this case, you're doing two jobs. It's like the the stills and the video, there are completely different jobs.
Yep.
And like, no, don't discount.
Yep.
Doing more with less doesn't mean for less.
Yeah. But let's talk about the elephant outside the room.
In the room, outside the room, everywhere.
Our biggest constraint right now is
huge.
that large groups of people are unsafe to gather, and filmmaking essentially has been a group project. It is not the domain of solo operators, except for documentarians and people like you who've chosen to see the benefits of doing it for whatever reasons, not as a rejection of something, but as an embracing of something. So let's riff on this for a little bit and talk about how COVID can be an advantage. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing. COVID's not a good thing, but being resilient and being able to pivot are very important things, especially during times like this.
And we don't know what's going to happen. Let's say we find a vaccine in 6 months or something like that. I don't think this is going to be a one-time deal. I don't think this is going to be the last pandemic we see, or like there are so many other things that can happen. And in addition to that, traveling is going to be harder than before, for sure. Like baggage fees are going to increase, or they have already increased. Well, we're not paying attention. I'm looking at you, American Airlines, and then traveling is going to be harder. So the less people you have to move, the less gear you have to drag with you, the better. I mean, the more efficient it's gonna be. And definitely, I have been getting all the production protocols from different places, from Lisbon, Atlanta, LA, New York, and all these things. And they're somewhat related, but they're also very different. And I don't even know how can they actually enforce those things. Like, how often can you clean the gear? What's going to happen with rental equipment when you go and rent a lens? Like, for how long is that lens going to be out of circulation? How are going to I don't. It's going to be such a mess. So working with less, being more resourceful, and with less people, faster, more efficient is going to be is here to stay for sure.
Right. And providing maximum value with minimum risk.
Yeah.
The fewer people involved, the less contact there is, and it's just math, right?
It is. I mean, it is. And also, we talk, the slide also mentioned the marketing budgets. I mean, there are many companies that are not doing well. So they don't have the luxury just to throw money on marketing. So who's gonna get the job? The person who can get the job done more efficiently, and not the person who needs just 2 Alexas or 2 Reds just to start the conversation. So that's the new reality.
Now, you told me, we were talking about this yesterday, and you said that bad weather, the one-person crew has a huge advantage when it comes to bad weather, and that's because of the extra cost of transporting people around, right?
Yeah, well, and not only bad weather, but you can move much more quickly, like you have a plan B. A classic example, I was working with a very large crew, and for whatever reason, that was a couple of years ago, and the location we had secured for lunch, for whatever reason, was unavailable, and there was nothing else in town. So right then and there, you have 40 people waiting, and they are not going to continue working if you don't feed them. So it's just like, what do you do? Where do you find lunch for 40 people? And now we have to reschedule. Okay, let's go home. We lost half a day. With a very small crew, 2 or 3 people, you can move very quickly. Like, if there is bad weather, you can come back the next day. You can stay another day. On one of my most recent courses, I talk about my perfect week and how when I'm doing like a 1 week gig, I like to schedule 2 days for shooting, 1 day for editing, and 1 day off. And that day off is, if everything goes perfect according to the plan, I actually just take it off. Like I go and sightseeing and whatever. But if something happened between like in the first couple of days,
Right.
then that's a wonderful way to reshoot or get additional content without affecting the rest of the schedule. So, and that's so much harder when you're manning, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 people.
Right. Hey, you're shooting right now, aren't you? You took a break from that to talk with us.
This is the break.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just finished my 9th and 10th online filmmaking courses for LinkedIn Learning, and today I started shooting the 11th. So we are at the
Wow.
location where I am shooting the 11th course, which happens to be one-person crew tips and tricks.
That's
It's
amazing.
gonna be all about tips and tricks for the one-person crew approach.
When do you think that one will come out?
Well, that's definitely Q4. So it's definitely most likely first week of October. The previous ones have been delivered, so we're looking at 3 to 4 weeks before they go live.
Oh.
So first week of September, and then this one that I'm shooting now today, I started. Should be first week of October.
Aha. So if people want to know how to get to that, I'm just going to say it now. Like how can they do that? Should we send them to your website?
Well, onepersoncrew.com, onepersoncrew.com. It has all
Post
the
it in the
info.
chat. Yep.
Or LinkedIn Learning, and just look for my name, and then all the courses are there. And the 8 previous courses, the ones that are live, have been watched by, last time we counted, like 950,000 people from 120 countries.
Amazing.
So that's pretty interesting.
Amazing. I think I've seen 2 of your courses, and I have to go watch the rest now. I'm going to post up that link also. So Eduardo, straight to your LinkedIn Learning page. I just posted that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Why don't you show us, since you are in the one-person crew mindset, what gear are you using right now to not only do this stream but record? Can you turn your camera around?
The stream, yeah, it's very easy. Let's see if I can.
Ooh, we got a tour.
This is, I wasn't expecting this, but let's see if I can move without breaking.
Well,
anything.
thank you for accommodating my curiosity.
Actually, one of the tips that I don't think I'm gonna be including that on the course, but a great approach is to rent an Airbnb and somewhere awesome, and then you can stay at that location and also use it as your studio.
So you don't have to set up and break down all the time.
Exactly. You just set up, and then the way I like to set up always is that they don't interrupt, like the gear doesn't interrupt the normal flow of things. Mm-hmm. So as you can see, well, we're in the kitchen. So this is the camera view, and very simple approach.
Look at that.
My Benro tripod and my little Saramonic mic. Very nice.
Oh, cool.
And then in this case, I'm using the GH5 because I am testing HLG, which is the last blog post on One Person Crew, is hybrid lot gamma. And now here I have 2 lights, and here I have another light, and this is the Nonlight, the Mixpanel 60. And the way I like to set these things up is I'm gonna be sitting here. So I'm gonna turn, and without moving from my actual, from this place, I can control this is an external monitor recorder. that is connected to the camera. So I can start and stop the camera. I can check the framing. I can check exposure. And then I can also control sound. And I'm also monitoring sound at the same time. I can control the lights. I can change the color temperature and the brightness. And the view from my seat looks like this. And the reason I have three lights is I'm not using the three lights at the same time. It's because I want to get this background, which it's pretty bright right now. But depending on the time of the day, I might use one or two, like the two on this side, or this one here, depending on how the sun is hitting the room. And because this next course, the one I started shooting today, is one video per week, they don't have to match the lighting. So I can do one video today at 10 a.m. and then tomorrow at 3 p.m. And as long as the video matches the light, is fine. And in terms of other tools, I have my most essential is my light meter here, my color meter, the color checker video, so I can put it in front of the camera and check my waveform, especially critical when I'm shooting HLG, which is like shooting log, and the transmitter. So the cool thing about this approach is that without moving, I can control everything. I can control the lights, I can control the camera, I'm monitoring sound, I'm doing everything. And so it took me a few hours to set up everything. And also, even though I'm here by myself, I like to keep everything like very neat, like you see all the cables and everything else, because it's good practice, like this can be like a complete mess, but then you start getting sloppy. And when I'm working with other people or the client shows up, then you have a problem. So it's good practice to keep everything like very nice and organized.
Makes perfect sense.
So it took me a few hours to set this up, but now it's not going anywhere. It's not moving. So I'm gonna be here for like a week shooting, and because of the lighting setup, I can shoot at like any time of the day. And the approach is gonna be, I have something else I didn't show you is something that you don't see because I don't use it, is a teleprompter, and which is not common. It's not normal. Normally you would have a teleprompter here or closer to the light. I only have the bullet points or the titles of the movies, and the way I approach all my educational content is I have to understand it really well so I can explain it. And so I practice, I read, and I do it on my own until I get it very, very clearly in a way that I can explain it without having to read from a teleprompter. So if I don't fully understand it, then I'm not gonna explain it. And so this is a great setup. And my typical workflow is in the morning, after 2 or 3 cups of coffee, then I work on one of the videos and I write the main ideas and until I get it very, very tight, and then jump in front of the camera, turn everything on, do 1 or 2 takes, and then I'm shooting from the camera into the external recorder. So I'm shooting into solid state drives, ProRes LT for those geeks attending. And then I take the SSD, connect it to the computer, and I start editing right away. I don't need to transcode, I don't need to download, I don't need to do anything. And it's a really efficient workflow.
That's great. That dovetails right into, since we were talking about gear and you're kind enough to take us on a tour, you're the thread throughout this whole thing is how to do more with less. That is the one person crew mantra, right? Yeah. So we prepared this for you guys that are watching. Eduardo has 2 columns here. One is must-have gear and one's nice-to-have gear. Why don't you walk us through that?
Yeah. So before I forget, all this gear that you see here, the lights, the cameras, all the things, I carry that myself. Like one person, I the in my bag and the two shoulder bags with the lights and the tripod is another shoulder bag, and that's it. So I could technically take public transportation with all this gear if I wanted to.
That's amazing.
So that's a really good way to work. Going back to the slide, the must-have gear is this is especially critical for photographers just getting into video. Sound is such an important part of video, of making movies, that but as photographers you don't think about sound because you don't have to. So the number one on the list is getting a good microphone, and I have several articles on that, on which ones to get when I'm comparing 6 microphones side by side and 6 different lavalier mics and all these things. But getting a really good microphone is absolutely essential, because half jokingly, I always say that if everything goes completely wrong, but you have good sound, at least you have a podcast. But without sound, there is nothing. The second one on the must-have is a gimbal, especially for the kind of photography for the kind of visuals that I create and stories I tell, because it's very small, very compact, and you can do a lot with a gimbal. The other two tools are either a video monopod, a compact monopod with a fluid head, and or a travel tripod, the kind that you can remove one of the legs and then disattach and reattach the head, and then it becomes a video monopod. That's a very great, wonderful way to travel. And the filters is absolutely essential. A reflector, something like this, a 5-in-1, whatever it's called, 4-in-1, 6-in-1, silver, gold, and translucent. Absolutely wonderful. It works every single time. And another recommendation for must-have gear is fast cards and or solid-state drives, for the simple reason that, for example, most of what I shoot now is 4K, and not I'm outputting it as HD, but just as you saw, I'm only using one camera, and the framing is wide enough that because it's 4K, then I can crop it in post, and I get 2-in-1. I get 2 cameras in one because I'm outputting it as HD, 1920 by 1080. So a fast card to capture 4K is really important. Also, less download time and less upload time, and solid state drive to work. It's just gonna make your life so much better.
Can I add something there?
Absolutely.
Perhaps it's been explained other places, but it seems to be an advantage of shooting 4K and then punching in to HD to have 2 different shots is that you can light for 1 camera instead of 2 cameras also.
That's true, like what I'm doing right now. And you don't have to worry about 2 cameras. So for interviews, for example, I do use 2 cameras, one on a wider lens and one on a longer lens, but then you effectively get 4 cameras. That's a lot of coverage for 2 cameras.
No kidding.
Yeah. So it's really great. But for this kind of educational content with only 1 camera, you get 2 shots in one, and there's exactly the same lighting. So lighting continuity. Less everything, less hard drive space, less workflow. Nice to have. The list is endless, of course, but what I consider essential in this case, for example, the external monitor recorder is great because I can see exactly what I'm getting. And sometimes, like this morning when I was setting up, the softbox was like half of an inch in the frame. Like I wouldn't be able to just go check the camera, come back, and the background, my hair, whatever. Like it's very great. It's a very great tool. Also recording into the solid state drive is a godsend for efficiency, for speed. A motorized slider is really interesting. I have a very small one, and it works really well, especially for time lapses and for corporate interviews, music videos. It works really, really well. And the lights that you're seeing here, they're all LED, all bicolor, and they all can have you can attach a battery to them. Otherwise, I'm not even looking into I'm not even considering a light that is not bicolor and have the option to have a battery, because often I'm working at remote locations where I don't want to worry about bringing 200 batteries. So that, and the last one is grip and gear lighting and shaping tools. A, a great tool that I have here, but in the other room, is a shower curtain from IKEA. Is $3 or $4, and that's a fantastic way to diffuse light. So that was another approach that I considered, but didn't really work for these. Is you put the two LED lights like at full power, bare bulb, through the shower curtain, and you get a beautiful soft light that's just by itself is like very cinematic, has very soft, beautiful quality. So those are like what I consider like the most essential tools.
Got it. And there's a good blog post I remember reading about how you use that shower curtain. So go check out onepersoncrew.com and scroll down on the blog, and you'll find that blog post.
And the gear also, in onepersoncrew.com on the website, I have the gear broken into 3 different groups.
Funny you mentioned that.
Oh, perfect. That's the one. Okay, perfect. So the travel kit is the most minimalist, the least amount of gear that you're gonna need. If you're gonna be like using like Ryanair or one of those airlines.
Let me pause you for a second.
Yeah.
Everybody, check the offers on the side, or if you're watching this as a replay, check down in the description. The link will be there. You can follow the link there to Eduardo's website to see these, but we're going to talk our way through them right now, and I'll post in the chat too. Please continue.
Great. So the travel kit is the most compact, most essential, the minimalist travel gear. And that's for someone who needs to fit everything in one backpack or a carry-on. The second one, the Up and Running, which is named that's the name from the 9th course, the one that is going to go live very soon on LinkedIn, is the One Person Crew Up and Running, is for people getting started with video. And one of the challenges I had early on was there were so many different options. There were so many gimbals and so many lenses and so many filters and so many lights, and none of them are inexpensive. I mean, all this gear is pricey. So you don't want to make a mistake. You don't want to buy something and then realize you bought the wrong one or the outdated. Right. So having a list of the most essential gear that works, that is proven, field tested on the trenches, that I was really looking for that. So since I could not find it, I created it. And that's the Up and Running kit. So for photographers getting into video, for filmmakers getting more comfortable with video, that's the kit. The next one, the cinematic look, that's also the name of the LinkedIn course that it's going to be released very soon. And that's for people who either have already been shooting video for a while or are trying to enhance their production value. The classic situation with a lot of clients is they are comfortable shooting video, but what they see, the end result that they get, and what they see on YouTube or Vimeo, there is a gap, and they don't understand why. How can we make this production, increase the production value so it gets closer to what I'm seeing online. And often, very often, the difference is sound and light. That's classic. So on this list, I add a few more tools that are gonna help you to increase the production value, enhance the production value without spending a ton of money. So those are kind of like the three.
I love it. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for putting the care into doing this. And I want to add one more layer to the care that you put into this. You'll notice that we haven't said this particular product or that particular product. Yes, there's some Benro products in there. Eduardo trusts Benro, right? But to make this as useful as possible for as long as possible, Eduardo, thinking ahead, the guy that he is, made lists on Amazon with all of the most recent, most current gear, so that if you see this now or later and something has changed, he's going to update it with the most current useful piece of gear to match that goal.
And that's the reason. All this gear keeps changing fairly often, right? And for example, hard drives. The prices on hard drives keep dropping. And up to very recently, 2 years ago, solid state drives were kind of like out of reach. They were very expensive and the capacity was too low, 500 gigs, 1 terabyte max.
Right.
That's completely gone. Like now we can get a 2 terabyte solid state drive for an affordable price. So that's why I keep the list on Amazon, because I can add and replace and update models as things change, as technology evolves.
Right. So click through to his website, to the gear page, choose one of the three options, and then you'll end up at an Amazon list that shows all the most current options. On his website, he has lots of other really interesting things, hardware, software, and books. Tell us a little bit more about the other stuff there.
That was another super frustrating thing for me, the software.
Right.
I remember very early on, I mean, we're talking 2006, probably 2007. And I was very comfortable with Photoshop and Lightroom and many other photo editing applications.
Right.
But the first time I opened Final Cut 6, I think it was, I was like, what the hell? What's going on? Like, why do you have two windows here? What are all these things doing? And I started working with Final Cut, got very comfortable with that. But for many different reasons, I decided to switch to Premiere. And I could not find one person in New York City to teach me Adobe Premiere Pro at that time. And very often the comment was, why do you want to do that? Like, well, I have my reasons. So going through the plugins, there are so many different things that, again, I could not find one place that had all the different options listed without selling anything, without pushing anything.
Right.
So that's why I created that software. And it's kind of like bare bones. There are maybe 20 different things. It's not pages and pages. There are 20 different things that I use almost every single day. Right. From platforms to license music and sound effects to video editing software, and all the things that I consider like essentially my workflow are there. Right. And you mentioned Benro, that we have the Benro products and everything else. And something to be very clear about all the gear that I have on my website is I only talk about products and companies that I use and trust. I don't do anything just because. And I have been using all these different products since I started. So I don't know how many years ago. And the software and the books are the same. One place where I read a lot, I like reading a lot. So I wanted to compile all the books that have made a difference, books that are worth thousands of dollars, not $20 or $30, and that really leave a mark, like provide really good education. So those are the books.
Yep. Oh, and look at that right at the top. I'm looking at it right now. You put the conversations.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Great. And then I wanted to especially point out to everybody that there's one other thing that Eduardo is really extraordinarily good at. And he hinted at it along during this, but he is a superb educator. He's trusted by a lot of people to help them become better at their vocation, and that's creating a cinematic look, making film, making video, and the courses that he has built up over time on LinkedIn Learning are all separate and individually valuable, and they can build upon each other and inform each other. So I think there's something for everybody there, and more coming soon, as he mentioned. So we'll post that link again there. I highly recommend that you go get yourself access to these, and make sure that you have an opportunity to learn from Eduardo, continue learning with him, because he was very generous to spend time with us today and take time out of his schedule. And it'd be really wonderful if you could continue the conversation with him elsewhere and receive even more specific education from him.
Thank you for that. You're very generous. Something that I have always tried is to stick to the point, like especially with this educational content. So you will notice that not a single course is over an hour, because my goal is that if you want to get better at cinematic composition or camera movement, you can learn during one lunch break. In 1 hour, you can watch this course and you can learn a few tricks, hopefully, that are gonna make you a better filmmaker, a better storyteller. So those courses that are 8 hours long, 10 hours long, I just don't have the patience for that. So I just try to distill the best information, the actionable steps that you can take the course and go and apply them tonight.
And we thank you for that. Thanks for getting to the point, Eduardo.
It's very important.
It is. And I don't want to ignore, there's a couple of questions that we didn't answer yet.
Oh, please.
One came from Lawrence. Do you pre-plan the story, especially when you're traveling?
That's a great question. And it's very hard. It depends. The answer is it depends. If I'm working with a client, for a client, and I'm going on a specific project, shooting a project, yes, absolutely. Then I have a very clear, not necessarily a script, because it's very hard to write a script for like the documentary style thing that I do, but I have a shot list, and I do a lot of research about the place, the history, the political system, places that I want to go. A great tip is, if you go to, once you arrive, you go to a gift shop somewhere or a bookstore and take a look at the postcards. There's always a section with postcards, because those postcards highlight the best places and the best light from that specific location. So you can then go and capture that from your point of view. And so if it's for a client, absolutely, I do a lot of research. If it's for a personal project, I also like to read a lot about this, the place I'm going to visit, not necessarily or not specifically for the story, but to have an educated conversation with the locals and show them respect. And when you go and talk to a barber or the taxi driver or whoever you're connecting with, and you ask, like, so how do you feel about the last election that happened 3 months? Are you happy with the results? And what do you think about this candidate or the other candidate? And you know what's going on.
Right.
The dynamic changes completely.
Right.
Even if it's hard to communicate because of the language or whatever, they see you as someone, okay, this guy cares, and so we're gonna help him a little bit more. And so planning the shots comes from that, and a lot also, I do believe, which is also part of the conversations, the book, often the footage will tell you what it wants to be. You can have a very clear idea, very good script, but when you're working with the footage, it will tell you, if you let it, it will tell you, I want to be this. This is the story I want to become. So you have to also be open to that, and to be flexible enough to understand what the project wants to be.
Yep, that makes sense. If anybody else has any other questions that they'd like to ask, now is a great time to drop them in the chat. But we do want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you. This is great.
It's really, really been fun talking with you, Eduardo. I enjoyed it. I like having conversations with you. I'm glad we got to do it in public with other people around. And I'm glad to hear that there's more commerce in your area. There's all those flights going through. That's awesome. I definitely encourage all of you to follow the links in the chat or down in the description. Please go to his website, subscribe for his blog. You might get a prompt when you get there. Check out his gear page, and please go get at least one of his LinkedIn courses. In an hour, you will be better at what you do. I promise.
And feel free to ask questions after every blog post. I leave a section for comments, or you can find me on Instagram or Twitter. Or my email is very public, so feel free to connect and like, hey, I didn't get this part, or I'm debating between these two things. Just feel free. I'm happy to help others.
Yep. So thank you to Damon and Wendy and Nuno and Lawrence and all of the people who came and left comments and from all over the world. We had a very global audience today.
Very good.
Yes. So thank you to everybody. We appreciate your time. We'll see you at the next webinar. We'll see you online. And Eduardo, thanks for being our guest.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
We hope we'll have you on again.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Have a great day.